Okay, so like John mentioned, I was at Cascade over the summer through the Koch Summer Fellowship Program, and now I'm interning in the Senate. So that's why I'm here in DC. And I'm glad that John was able to go right before me because the transportation and land use are really tied very closely together, as you'll see. So I thought I'd take this opportunity to start off and give John Charles a little bit of a heart attack and say that Portland's motto, "the city that works," may actually be true. And I would also like to say that that's probably the problem. And I'm going to speak specifically about the lack of large lots in Portland. Potential new homeowners looking for a home in the Portland area today will notice a big discrepancy between the supply of land in Oregon, which is actually 98% undeveloped, and the size of lots throughout the Portland area today. In fact, in 1996, a study by Portland State said that the average lot size in Portland was 9,000 square feet. And today, if you talk to developers in the Portland area about a home that's 9,000 square feet, a lot that is 9,000 square feet, those developers will tell you that that is executive housing, because those are the only people who are going to be able to have that type of home. So at Cascade, my job was to find out whether or not this was a result of a conscious policy effort. And the way I did this was look through comprehensive plans of the cities, look at the zoning codes, talk to local planners. And for the purposes of our study, we're going to define a normal size traditional suburban lot as 10,000 square feet or 4 to 5 units per acre. So this is a decent sized lot, but it's not huge, but it'll give you enough room to have a good sized yard where the kids can play. So I started out my studying by looking into individual codes of different cities around the area. And I was trying to get a cross section of different types of cities. So I looked at larger cities, smaller cities, and unincorporated areas. And the first thing that surprised me was that there are very few lots that met our threshold for a traditional suburban sized lot. And the other thing that really surprised me was the uniformity among the different plans in the area. And this was especially surprising to me because I'm originally from the Chicagoland area and grew up in the suburbs there, and that is not the case at all. There's a lot of problems with Chicago, but one of them is not having different options for places to live. You can go to older, more established suburbs that will be on closed lots with access to public transportation, or you can go further out and have plenty of room and have just about anything in between. So there is a real market at work there in terms of housing options, and you have different suburban governments competing with the city and with each other to create attractive places for people to live. But looking through the plans in the Portland area, I realized that this is not the case. So I had to step away from the nitty-gritty of what was going on in the comprehensive plans and look to see where this was all coming from. And it turns out that this starts at the state level. So in 1973, the state of Oregon came out with statewide planning goals and guidelines. And goal 2 of this planning document says to establish land planning process and a policy framework as the basis for all decisions and actions related to the use of land. So that doesn't sound necessarily too exciting, but if you look into the meaning of that, it's taking what should be a private transaction. So if you have a piece of land, you want to sell it to a developer, now that's turning that into a private transaction and making it part of a political process. So anything regarding land use now has to go through the political process to be approved. But this is not the main problem with what's going on in Portland. We have to go down another level to metro regional government to see why there's so much uniformity in the Portland area, and they're the ones who are in charge of implementing this goal and coming up with their own planning goals. So for those of you who aren't familiar, Metro is a unique tri-county regional government established in 1970, and it has 7 councilors. 6 of them come from different districts and 1 is at large. And they're unique because It's the only regional government where there are elected officials like this, and it also has a lot more power than other regional governments. And I'd say that there's two main ways that they exercise control. And the first way that they exercise control is that they have a monopoly of all the developable land through use of the urban growth boundary. So that's what I have a picture of up there. And this is kind of a simulation of the urban growth boundary here. It's basically a line that they draw around the metropolitan area, and everything inside is developable land, and everything outside is basically zoned to make it impossible to have a suburban development. And Metro is charged with the task of...
within the 3 counties?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, this covers the 3-county area here.
John?
Yep.
Pointer.
Yeah, so you have Washington, Portland's here, and then Clackamas out here.
What do you mean Multnomah County?
Yeah, Portland is mostly Multnomah County,
Yeah.
so. But, so Metro's in charge of maintaining the urban growth boundary. The urban growth boundary isn't supposed to stay the same forever, and they're in charge of calculating how much land is needed inside the urban growth boundary to maintain a 20-year supply of land within it. And I'm not going to get into how they come up with that calculation because it was almost impossible to figure out. I still don't really understand it. And when you talk to them, I don't think they do either. But as you can see, that's very important when it comes to determining the size of lots because they have control over all the land where you can build on. The second major mechanism of control is that they have oversight over local developers and planners. So each city has their own planners that are also working on this. And you would think that maybe local planners would be in charge of coming up with local issues and problems that they're running into with the plan put forth by Metro. But really what those planners are doing is working to implement the larger plan on a smaller level. So there's not really any pushback there from local communities. They're all kind of working together in a top-down effort, like I said, originally from the state goal, Metro, and local planners. And like I said, they also have a lot of control over developers. One, because like I mentioned, they can bring in the amount of developable land that they want. And two, they have control over what is called CET funds. So CET funds go to fund the planning process, which is too expensive for developers to pay for themselves. So what they did is they created a really high cost for planning for development, and then they also created a tax to pay for this, and now they control developers through this by handing them out funds for cooperating. And
CET stand for, please?
Construction excise tax.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's how they generate the money, is a tax on all new construction.
Right. And finally, if all of that doesn't work, if developers figure out how to pay for it on their own, they can still legally go into the developer's plan and have it changed to a plan that fits their broader plan. So now let's look at a little bit more local level. Talk about the city of Portland. So most of the information I got from the city of Portland came from the planner who heads the Bureau of Planning and Sustainability. He was actually nice enough to have a pretty long conversation with me about what they're doing in there. And one of the most interesting and shocking things that he told me about future housing capacity, so all the future units of housing that will be built, he told me that 85% of that will be for multifamily housing in the city of Portland. So obviously that means you don't have to worry about the lot size because there's not going to be any lot at all. It's going to be multifamily for almost all the housing in the future. But another interesting thing that the planner told me while talking to him is he admitted that there's numerous problems that Portland has encountered in the past coming up with these plans. And a lot of these problems I'm sure John Charles has talked about before at this conference. Problems with transit-oriented development, not enough parking, problems with congestion in these quarters that they're building out. And finally, when they do get areas built out like they originally planned, they have problems with local residents coming in and complaining that this is not what they actually wanted. Once they see that it's there, they realize the problems that come along with that, And then they finally push back, but unfortunately at that point it's too late. So once he admitted that they had these problems, I asked, what are you guys doing to, improve upon this? What is your solution so that we don't run into this in the future? And basically the solution was to keep doing the same thing further out with minor tweaks. So what I've learned from talking to numerous planners is that it's never the overall plan that should be questioned or the assumptions behind the plan. There's always minor tweaks that can be made to make it better in the future. So for example, with the parking, one of the problems was obviously there wasn't enough parking. So the minor tweak they made, for every 4 units that are built, there now has to be 1 parking space. That was their idea of solving that problem. But, Portland's the city, it's the center of the urban area, so you'd expect that if there's going to be anywhere where there's dense housing, it would be here. So let's go out to the suburbs and see if things are any better out there. Nice suburban neighborhoods right here. So, judging from these pictures, you can see it doesn't look any better out in the suburbs. Even though you're further out, that's theoretically where people go to get more space. This strange pattern of development in the Portland area is a result of a penalty on the last people in. Because people who are living in established neighborhoods, they're already in there, they like where they live, and that's why they moved there. They have bigger lots, and they don't want this new planning to come in and change their lifestyle. So that's where Metro would see some real pushback. So who has to bear the brunt of all the new density coming into the Portland area? It's these people living really far out in these new developments. So one of the suburbs in the Portland area is Wilsonville, and it's a perfect example of this because they have a lot of data on their website about what kind of housing is going on in there, and also because it brushes up right against the UGB, the urban growth boundary. So it's as far out as you can get in the developable area. And only 52% of the housing in Wilsonville is single-family homes versus 70% of the housing in the whole metropolitan area being single-family homes. When you look at the density, there's 7.6 units per acre is their average for single-family homes. That's almost twice what we were looking for traditional lot size of 4 to 5 units per acre. And they want to make it higher. For their multifamily homes, their average was 18.5 units per acre. So people are really crammed in there. And if you look in their planning documents, they will say that the reason that the density is so high is because of their planning efforts. And what they've done is they've changed the minimum allowable densities. So for the example they give is they had densities of 7 to 12 units allowed for single family homes in certain areas, and they've changed that to 10 to 12 in order to meet their goal of having an average of 10 units per acre. Yeah?
Can I ask a probably a dumb question, but are people renting those or are they actually buying those as their home?
I think a lot of people are buying them as their home. Is that your understanding?
They're not rental units.
Well, they're mixtures of condos, townhomes, apartments.
They look like apartments, sort of.
So, but when you go out shopping, and I've had people express this to me, they go out weekend after weekend after weekend shopping, when all of your choices look the same and are the same, and you have huge employers, namely Nike and Intel, hiring hundreds, thousands of new people out there on the west side, but all of the neighborhoods on the west side are being developed at double, triple, quadruple the density of the city of Portland. It's bizarre. There are no other choices.
And they're not cheap?
No.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
That's okay. So another example that I'd like to talk about is Beaverton, and mainly what I'd like to talk about there is reading directly from their comprehensive planning code, because they have a perfect paragraph to basically sum up what I've been trying to say thus far, and they say it themselves. So in their comprehensive planning code it says, in April 2000, 200 parcels were designated low-density residential totaling 89 acres. Overall, this area yields 356 persons, fewer than envisioned by the regional model. To limit the city's deficit in its regional share of population, expansion of the low-density residential areas must be prohibited. So it's pretty obvious that this is coming down from Metro. It's a regional model, and that they're trying to get rid of any low density areas because it's screwing up their plans. So I'd like to give another example of a little bit more outrageous case, and this is out in Hillsborough, so also pretty far out near Beaverton where Nike is. There's a lot of industry there. And this is called Amber Glen. And Amber Glen basically defies technical advice given to them because there was an economic analysis run on this, and the experts said that the higher construction costs due to the materials that you need to build mid to high-rise buildings is just way too high to warrant development on this land because the land is not worth enough. Which, by the way, there is nothing where that sketching is right now. It's an empty field. And it looks like Manhattan. There's a nice central park there too, so that's where your outdoor space is. And you just have to ask the question, is this real? Do people really believe that this is going to happen? Well, this could be the one tool that developers have to develop more executive housing because they can use density transfers to transfer some of the higher density to areas like this and make it really high density so they could build a few more of those low density single family homes that are being demanded. But obviously this creates more of a shortage of housing in the long run. And then, yeah, this is just an overview of that plan. So the red areas is pretty high density housing, so that's like where high rises would be. Yellow is mid-rise, so there's still going to be pretty much all apartments, and there's no houses planned for this development. Yeah.
Did I understand that some people go out to the Vancouver area if they want large lots?
Yeah, people can do that because that's outside Metro's jurisdiction and outside Oregon too.
It's outside Metro for now.
They like to suck it into Metro.
Yeah, that's kind of the one safety that you can go if you want a large
But
house.
then you have to go across the Columbia River
Then you
Crossing
gotta go
Bridge, which
across
is what we
the
talked
ocean.
about this morning, and that's a whole other.
So I'd like to conclude by saying that there's basically a lack of critical thinking going on in the Portland area when it comes to these planning problems. People are sucked into certain assumptions of what needs to be done to preserve farmland, address climate change, and create more equity. These are the words that they use in their documents to justify for going through with all these plans and making everything more dense. And I think a lot of the problem stems from a lack of citizen concern overall throughout the area, and most importantly, a lack of intergovernmental oversight. Everyone who's working in the government basically seems to agree there that this is what has to be done to move forward. And this is what I'd like to propose to you, is a model of a government that works because everyone's working towards the same goal here, and they're not necessarily working for what's good for citizens. Thanks.
You got that right.